Picture a man sitting in a Washington office, wielding the power to obliterate trillions of dollars in market value with a single decision. This man isn't a president, isn't a war general, he's Gary Gensler, chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and he has declared a silent war against the greatest financial revolution of the past 50 years, cryptocurrency. In April 2021, when Gensler took command of the SEC, the crypto market was worth approximately $2 trillion. Today, after 3 years of relentless legal battles, billion-dollar lawsuits, and a systematic campaign of regulatory intimidation, that number has plummeted to less than half. Coincidence? Absolutely not. Behind the scenes of American regulation, a meticulously planned strategy is being executed. This isn't just about protecting investors or maintaining financial system stability. This is about something far deeper: absolute control over the future of digital money. Gensler isn't merely regulating cryptocurrencies. He's rewriting the rules of the game to ensure Washington maintains control over every transaction, every innovation, every digital penny that circulates on American soil. The architecture of this war is both fascinating and terrifying. While the public sees only headlines about fines and lawsuits, the truth is, we're witnessing the greatest battle for financial control in modern history. On one side, an industry that promised to decentralize financial power. On the other, a regulator determined to centralize that power back into the hands of the federal government. But how exactly does Gensler plan to win this war? And what are the consequences for millions of American investors who bet their savings on the future of cryptocurrency? The answer lies in a strategy so sophisticated, so ruthlessly effective, that it's redefining how regulatory warfare is conducted in the 21st century. To understand Gary Gensler's crusade, we need to go back to the exact moment when everything began. But here's the twist. Gensler didn't start this war. He inherited it, and then he weaponized it beyond anyone's imagination. December 2020. The stage for Gensler's war was already being set before he even assumed command. In the final days of the previous SEC administration, a bomb was dropped on Ripple Labs. A $1.3 billion lawsuit alleging that XRP was an unregistered security. Gensler didn't light the fuse. But when he took control in April 2021, he grabbed that grenade and hurled it into the heart of the industry. The crypto market was in full euphoria when Gensler arrived. Bitcoin had just hit $65,000. Ethereum was skyrocketing. Thousands of new cryptocurrencies were emerging daily. It was the digital Wild West, and Gensler was appointed sheriff. But this wasn't an ordinary sheriff. Gensler had a track record. Former Goldman Sachs executive, former chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, MIT professor specializing in blockchain technology. He knew the system inside and out. More importantly, he knew exactly where to strike. Gensler's strategy wasn't accidental, it was surgical. Instead of creating clear rules for the industry to follow, he chose the path of intentional ambiguity. His secret weapon? The concept of security under federal law. According to American law, any asset deemed a security must follow strict registration and disclosure rules that cost millions of dollars and take years to comply with. The plan was genius in its simplicity. Classify most cryptocurrencies as securities. Force companies to choose between spending fortunes on compliance or simply leaving the United States. It was a regulatory guillotine disguised as investor protection. The first signs of Gensler's intensified campaign appeared in June 2021. The SEC began sending investigation letters to dozens of crypto projects. These weren't formal charges, they were warnings, clear messages. You're in our crosshairs. The psychological pressure was working. Companies began canceling launches. Investors began hesitating. Fear was spreading through Silicon Valley like a digital virus. But Gensler knew the Ripple case he inherited was his perfect weapon. XRP was the world's third largest cryptocurrency, with a market cap of $24 billion. More importantly, Ripple had partnerships with traditional banks worldwide. It was the perfect link between the old financial system and the new. Destroying Ripple would be like cutting the bridge between two worlds. The legal battle that followed was epic. For 3 years, Ripple spent over $200 million on lawyers. The the SEC mobilized its best prosecutors. Confidential documents were revealed. Explosive depositions came to light. The entire market held its breath because everyone knew the outcome of this case would define the fate of the entire American crypto industry. Behind the scenes, something fascinating was happening. The SEC was using psychological warfare tactics, strategic leaks to the press, ambiguous statements from Gensler in congressional hearings, parallel investigations against Ripple's partners. It was a scorched earth campaign disguised as a judicial process. But in July 2023, the unthinkable happened. Judge Annalisa Torres issued a ruling that shook Washington. XRP was not a security when sold on public exchanges. It was a partial victory, but devastating to Gensler's strategy. The first major domino had fallen. The SEC's reaction was immediate and revealing. Instead of accepting defeat, Gensler doubled down. If he couldn't win in court, he would change the battlefield. The next phase of his war would target the very infrastructure that kept the crypto economy alive. With the partial defeat in the Ripple case, Gary Gensler needed a new strategy, and he found it in a classic military tactic: divide and conquer. If he couldn't bring down the crypto industry all at once, he would attack its main infrastructure. The targets? The exchanges. The cryptocurrency trading platforms that moved trillions of dollars annually. June 2023. In a single day, the SEC launched 2 coordinated attacks that rocked the crypto world. First target, Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, accused by the SEC of operating a web of deception. Second target, Coinbase, the first crypto exchange listed on the American stock market, accused of operating as an unregistered securities exchange. The strategy was diabolical in its efficiency. By attacking the exchanges, Gensler didn't need to sue thousands of crypto projects individually. He just had to force the exchanges to remove problematic cryptocurrencies from their platform. It was like cutting off oxygen to the entire market with 2 precise surgery. The Coinbase case was particularly revealing of the system's hypocrisy. The company had gone through a rigorous IPO process in 2021, approved by the SEC itself. For months, federal regulators analyzed every aspect of Coinbase's business. They approved everything. 2 years later, the same SEC was claiming the company had been operating illegally from the beginning. Brian Armstrong, Coinbase's CEO, didn't hide his indignation. In a series of viral tweets, he accused the SEC of regulation by enforcement, creating rules through lawsuits instead of clear guidelines. It was the first time a public company CEO had directly confronted Gensler in public. But the most shocking revelation came through the court proceedings themselves. Internal communications revealed that the SEC had, in fact, rejected multiple attempts by Coinbase to obtain regulatory clarity before going public. Gensler wasn't seeking clarity. He was setting a trap. Meanwhile, Binance faced an even more devastating blow. Months after the SEC lawsuit, in November 2023, the exchange was forced into a separate $4.3 billion settlement with the Department of Justice for sanctions violations and anti-money laundering failures. The 1-2 punch decapitated Binance's leadership and exposed its internal operations. While Gensler tightened the regulatory noose, something unexpected began to happen. The crypto industry, traditionally fragmented and competitive, started uniting against a common enemy. It was the formation of an organized resistance that not even Gensler had anticipated. The first line of defense came from Congress. Lawmakers from both parties began publicly questioning the SEC's tactics. In an explosive hearing in September 2023, Congressman Tom Emmer confronted Gensler directly. "Mr. Chairman, you're destroying American innovation in the name of investor protection, but where are the investors you've actually protected?" The question echoed through Washington because it exposed a fundamental contradiction in Gensler's strategy. While he claimed to protect investors, his actions were destroying billions in value from American portfolios. It was protection that looked more like punishment. Meanwhile, the industry began mobilizing massive financial resources for the legal battle. Ripple had proven it was possible to beat the SEC in court. Other companies followed suit. Coinbase hired Washington's most expensive law firm. Binance brought former federal regulators onto their legal team. It was a legal arms race. But the resistance's most powerful weapon didn't come from courtrooms or Congress. It came from the market itself. Crypto companies began migrating en masse to friendlier jurisdictions: Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Switzerland, countries offering regulatory clarity and tax incentives. It was a brain drain and capital flight that began worrying even Gensler's allies. The turning point came in June 2023, when BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager with trillions under its control, filed to create a Bitcoin ETF. It was a clear signal. Wall Street had decided that cryptocurrencies were the future, with or without Gensler's approval. The institutional cavalry had arrived, and the war was about to enter its final phase. Today, 3 years after the beginning of Gary Gensler's crypto war, the battlefield is rapidly changing. In January 2024, the SEC was forced to approve the first Bitcoin ETFs in American history. It was a capitulation disguised as a regulatory victory. Gensler had lost the ideological war, but still controlled the rules of engagement. The evidence shows that Gensler's secret plan worked partially. He succeeded in centralizing control over cryptocurrencies into the hands of traditional institutions like BlackRock and Fidelity. The ETFs transformed Bitcoin into just another financial product controlled by Wall Street. The decentralization promised by cryptocurrencies had been, ironically, centralized by the very regulator who was supposed to combat it. But the cost was astronomical. It's estimated that Gensler's regulatory war cost the American economy over $500 billion in lost market value and squandered innovation opportunities. Hundreds of crypto startups migrated to other countries. Thousands of high-tech jobs were lost. Silicon Valley, the cradle of global innovation, saw its dominance over the financial future threatened for the first time in decades. The big question that remains is, was it worth it? Gensler achieved his goal of maintaining government control over the digital financial system. But at what cost? And for how long? Other countries are rapidly becoming the new global crypto innovation hubs, while the United States falls behind in one of the most transformative technologies in history. Gary Gensler's crypto war teaches us a fundamental lesson about power and innovation. When regulators choose control over progress, everyone loses. Investors lose money. Companies lose opportunities, and countries lose global competitiveness. The future will tell whether this was a strategic victory or a historic mistake that cost America its leadership in the next financial revolution. In the end, the greatest irony may be that in trying to control the future of money, Gensler may have ensured that future happens somewhere else. If you want to understand more about the battles that define the future of business, subscribe to Dark Suits and hit that notification bell. Because behind the scenes of power, there's always a story that needs to be told.